Okay. Okay, I'll just start talking. Okay, good morning, everybody that's joining us for the live Q&A session. I'm just going to start talking about a few relevant stuff with regards to Brassicas. As soon as you start filling the questions, we can start talking about the questions that you guys sent. Okay, when it comes to Brassicas, it's very important to select the right variety for the right season. I think if you choose the wrong variety, then your cabbage heads will start going into bolting or into seed, which means that you won't have any product to harvest, and we consider that a failed crop. Also, if you don't plant the right variety for whatever market you are producing for, then obviously your buyer won't buy the product. So it's very important to plant the right variety for the right slot and also for the right market. When it comes to selecting the right variety, I think the first option you have to consider is, are you going to plant an OP or are you going to plant a hybrid? The difference between the two is very basically that an OP is usually considered an old variety. We don't claim any disease resistances, or we can't guarantee what the shape will look like. With the hybrids, the breeders actually select for different characteristics. So it's very important to consider the difference between the two, and also to consider the price difference between the two. So hybrids are much more expensive than OPs, but it's also guaranteed. We guarantee a disease package and whatever cabbage head or color, whatever you bought, you will get. Okay, so OPs differ with regards to temperature and environmental conditions. You don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes the cabbage head will be very flat, and when your market is set on a round cabbage that's more or less 3 kilograms, you won't be able to sell your flat cabbages. So with a hybrid, you can either buy something that's suited to a rounder market or a smaller market or a bigger market. And I think that's more or less the difference between OPs and hybrids. Okay, also for market sizes, it's very important. Historically, people wanted to plant cabbages that was very big. They wanted to grow a larger cabbage head. And I think a few years ago, they started talking to some of the consumers, and a lot of the ladies that buys cabbages next to the roads started communicating that a large cabbage head is too difficult for them to carry home. So they wanted something that's a bit smaller, something that's more in a range of 3 kilograms to 3.5 kilograms. And this made the market tend to grow a little bit smaller cabbages as well. So it all depends on where you're based. If you are based close to, let's say, for example, Johannesburg or Pretoria, you can grow larger stuff because a lot of people around here has got vehicles and they can store the cabbages. But if you are based in a more remote area, then you have to kind of grow smaller cabbages because the people can't store it and they don't always have refrigeration facilities. Okay. So I'm going to start. There was 2 questions that came through a little bit earlier. The first one was from Jonas Bimbo. He wanted some information regarding the production of cabbages. He wants to start growing cabbages. So Jonas, this is a very difficult question to just answer in 5 minutes. You're going to have to consider a lot of things. I think you're going to have to consider what type of soil you're planting in, what season you're going to have to plant in, obviously what cultivar you're going to have to plant, what market you're going to produce for. So if you could maybe send us your email address, we can give you all the relevant information you need with regards to fertilization, soil preparation. If you indicate in which area you're situated, we can help you with which variety you have to plant. And we also have some market information on which variety performs best for that market. So we can help you with that as well. So Jonas, just send us your email address and we'll get back to you. Okay. Patrick also asked, why does newly transplanted cabbage wilt and die? So this is also could be a lot of different things. Firstly, the irrigation could be a problem. Seedlings are very sensitive to being desiccated, so they need a lot of water in the beginning. Okay, I'll get back to that question now. Let's just quickly go to this question. Hi Q, is it necessary to fumigate the soil before planting cabbage? It all depends on the history of what happened in the soil. If there's a lot of nematodes, a lot of people prefer fumigating. But I don't think it's a common practice. Fumigation is not a common practice when it comes to cabbage production, so it's not necessary. Like I said, it all depends on what your history was of the field that you want to plant in. Some people do trellising. or what is that plastic? Mulching. Yes, they do mulching. Sorry, I forgot the word. Some people do mulching, and that's got more or less the same effect where the temperature, that the sun actually heats up that specific area that you mulched with plastic, and it also kills everything that's bad in there. So a lot of people do that as well for cabbage production. Okay, let's just go back to the newly transplanted cabbage that wilts and dies. So the irrigation is a big problem. If you transplant a seedling and you don't irrigate it for 5 days, it would have desiccated. And that's usually the first reason for a newly transplanted seedling to die. Secondly, it could be disease. There could be some soil diseases like Pythium or Rhizoctonia in the soil, or it could have come from where you made your seedlings. That's also one of the big reasons why a seedling could die. And also, you have to remember that you're taking a seedling from a well-known environment, which is in the seedling trays, and you're putting it into the soil. So the seedling goes through a lot of transplant shock, and that usually also results in some of the seedlings dying. Okay. So at Sakata, we've done a lot of development work on selecting different cabbage varieties for different slots, for different markets, and for different disease resistances that you require. We've got some excellent varieties that performs very well in winter specifically because it doesn't have the required disease package for the summer. I think one of the biggest diseases that we struggle with in summer, one of the most well-known ones, is black rot. It's caused by a bacteria called Xanthomonas. And when it's warm and when there's a lot of moisture, this bacteria proliferates, and then it's just everywhere. It spreads for nothing. So we've got a very good variety for summer called Optima, and it's got very good resistance to black rot. And another disease that we've struggled with a lot in the past few years is what was first known as Brassicas stunting disorder. It's now been renamed to turnips yellows virus. It's distributed by the yellow peach aphid. So insect control is very, very important when it comes to cabbage production as well. Diamond black moth is also a big problem. There are I know a lot of farmers always ask us for insect resistance. Okay, I'm going to answer that question now. There's a lot of farmers that ask us for insect resistant varieties. There's no insect resistant varieties in the market. There is a natural selection for insects to go to certain varieties, usually when they're a bit sweeter or a different kind of color green, but that's also different for all areas. So there's nothing that we can claim resistance on for insects. Okay. Okay, Q asked again, is cabbage frost resistant? In my area, Midvaal, there's a high level of frost, so we're scared of planting. Cabbage is, to a certain extent, frost tolerant. I don't think any varieties or any vegetable whatsoever is frost resistant. So if you get frost for consecutive 4 or 5 days, it's going to be very difficult for your plant to outgrow it. But if there's one spell of frost one morning, and your cabbages are already at a quite advanced stage, they usually have the ability to outgrow the damage that happened at the top leaves. So if you look at a cabbage, I can illustrate with my hands. If you look at a cabbage, the outer leaves, the wrap leaves, are always bigger and they stand up a bit straight. So the frost comes from the top and it hits those leaves. So the heads are never damaged. So like I said, if it's 1 or 2 spells throughout the season, they'll be able to outgrow it if they're big enough yet. If it's still a seedling, usually there's a lot more damage. So thank you for participating, Q. We appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to just talk a little bit about brassicas overall. So I'm going to talk about some cauliflower and broccolis as well. If you guys have any questions about the cabbages still, please keep on asking. Okay. So for cauliflowers, cauliflower is a difficult crop to grow in all areas, but we also do a lot of development work on specific seasonal establishment. What we are very excited about is that we now have cauliflowers that's maturing a bit faster in comparison to all the older varieties. Some people, I was speaking to a grower yesterday and he told me that there was a very old OP called Snowcap and it took 7 months to mature, which is very long for a cauliflower for any vegetable to grow into maturity and to go into a harvestable head. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the cauliflower discussion now. Let's just quickly go to the question. Hello, Indri. Is there any update on the stunting disorder on cabbages? And is there any chemicals that helps? Yes, there are chemicals that's helping. If you a few years ago, I think a lot of the cabbage that was planted was declined because of this disease, because I think everybody was blown out of the field. We couldn't prepare ourselves for what happened for about 2 years or so. But then all the chemical companies also started doing a lot of work on this. So if you talk to your chemical rep, most of them have got spraying programs for this. And it's all about using alternative chemicals and alternating between them. So you have to use different mode of actions because these insects have the ability to build up resistance very quickly. With most new diseases coming in, the insects have the ability to build up resistance very quickly, and their lifespan is about 28 days. So every 28 days, you're going to have to alternate different generations, so you're going to have to use different chemicals. Okay, I think it's best to talk to your chemical rep or area representative. They know all the different trade names for the different countries and the different actives that's effective against all stages of the yellow peach aphid. Okay, and like I said previously, it's now called the turnips yellows virus, and it's transmitted by yellow peach aphid. Okay, so going back to the cauliflowers, we now got varieties that matures much faster. They take about anything from 65 days upwards if you are in areas like the Cape, which helps the farmers a lot because it means they can put more cycles into one season. And if you put more cycles into one season, it means that you can obviously take off more crop for the whole year and you can have more turnaround. So as a product development team, we try to focus on varieties that has less input costs and that can help you be in and out faster so that you can be in the market for longer and also have more seasons on your field. Also, a lot of the older variety cabbages used to grow very large heads. So one of the biggest lines of supermarkets is a Cauliflower, which is half a head of cauliflower, half a head of broccoli. And if the cauliflower head is too big, obviously you can imagine that it doesn't fit well in a punnet. So we've got nice varieties that's now perfect for the punnet size, for the prepacker. It's the same size as a broccoli, more or less, and it doesn't take 4 months longer to mature in comparison to the broccoli. So that's where we are with cauliflowers. We also have done a lot of work on broccolis. I think, especially with broccolis, everybody knows Parthenon. It's one of the market leaders, not only in South Africa, but worldwide. The problem with some of the varieties that's used year-round is that sometimes they do tend to get hollow stem, for example, if they're not planted in their specific slot. So Parthenon is actually known as a winter cultivar. It's a very fast-growing, it's a very vigorous variety. So when you plant it out of slot, let's say in summer, where everything grows even faster than it physiologically grows, then sometimes you get hollow stem, which is a physiological disorder. And hollow stem is not a problem if you use the broccoli immediately, but if you want to store it, it will cause decay and obviously a decline in shelf life. So I think we have done a lot of work on summer varieties. I don't think I know. We've done a lot of work on summer varieties and developing varieties that suits the summer market, which will not get hollow stem. So we've got some new varieties called Ares and Triton, which is not for full summer, but more going into winter slot, which can also be used as a processor head. It's a very, very big head. It can grow very big. And then we've also got Naxos, which is also a very nice summer variety. Parthenon is then known as our winter variety. And when it comes to the cauliflowers, some areas plant Merton year-round. Incline is more our winter variety, but there are also areas that's got very mild winters, and they also use Incline quite frequently and year-round. And then we've got something like Eskimo, which is more suited to your winter slot, and it's a bit slower maturing. I think everything in winter is a bit slower. I always tell the people at the farmers' days, us humans are also slower in winter, so we have to allow the plants to be a bit slower as well. Everything matures a bit slower when there are temperature spikes and falls. So you have to take the history of the plant into account before you grow impatient if it's not ready to harvest. Okay. Brassicas overall are very sensitive to temperature fluctuations. If there's a very high day temperature and a very low night temperature, and that continues for a few days, they tend to respond, and they act like we haven't selected them for. So with the cabbage, for example, if they experience temperature fluctuations, extreme temperature fluctuations, they sometimes make small little cabbage heads at the bottom. So that's their way of showing that it's under stress and it wants to go into seed because it now knows that it's going to die soon. So that's why I'm saying it's important for you to know your environment. It's important to know what kind of winters you can expect where you are situated. Is it very cold? Do you have mild winters? Does summer get very hot? Do you have a history of disease on that field? Do you have a history of nematodes on that field? There's a lot of stuff to take into account. I think that's part of this is now answering Patrick's question, where he said he's interested in cabbage production and he wants to start doing that. You have to take everything into account. So I think if it's a, okay, sorry, let me just quickly go back to the question. Cabbage direct sowing. Okay, definitely don't plant seeds. Seedlings is the best for cabbages. If you go to any nursery in South Africa, you'll see that there's a lot of work done on cabbage seedlings. The advantages of planting a seedling is that you already know exactly what you've transplanted where. You can manipulate the planting population, because if you plant seeds, you don't know what's going to germinate. It's all dependent on the soil temperature and what kind of water you put down. So I think definitely with seedlings, you can know exactly what you put down, what you planted, and keep that alive. So that's one of the big advantages. Petunia, which aspects of market research should I consider before I start growing a certain crop? Okay, thanks, Petunia. For any vegetable crop, you have to consider, where am I going to take my final product? Am I going to the fresh market? Am I going to a supermarket? Will I be selling to the hawker market? That's three of the considerations you have to keep in mind, because every one of those markets has a different kind of crop that they want. If you go to the fresh market, for example, with a cabbage head, you'd want to go for a bigger one because you want to fill up bins, or it has to look appealing. But if you want to go to a supermarket, for example, they don't want those big heads. If you go to a supermarket and you go look for cabbage, you'll most probably find baby cabbages in a pre-pack, in a poly pack, or you'll most probably find a smallish cabbage head in, let's say, the fruit and veggies, for example, which is about 3 kilograms. It's not those 16, 17 kilograms things. And then I think if you go to the hawker market, it has to have something with a shelf life, because it has to stand next to the road and people will have to come buy it and have to carry it or take it, transport it back home. So also you have to consider, are you going to use this as a fresh market product? Like in terms, is it going to be used as a whole, or is it going to be processed? So there's a lot of considerations to take into, there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration. And yeah, if you can answer all those questions, we can help you to select the right variety without asking any more questions. So yeah, that's the kind of aspects you have to look at. Okay. Q, just to go back to your question on the direct sowing of the seeds versus seedlings. The other problem with the direct sowing is that sometimes you do get animals that goes for the seeds and they will come take the seeds out of the soil. We see it a lot with other crops that are transplanted from seeds. So for cabbages, and especially if you're planting a hybrid, you definitely want to put down a seedling. A lot of people that does it from seeds, they make a seedling bed, and then from there they take out a few seedlings and put it into the rows in any ways. And that's just a lot of transplant shock as well. You break off a lot of the roots and your plant is not as strong from the start. So they are more susceptible to disease. It's just for you to take out a whole plug, like what the seedling provides, seedling nurseries provides, is just the most beneficial thing for growing cabbages. You want a cabbage plant that's going to have a very strong start, and it's less susceptible to any attacks of insects, for example, or any kind of disease that comes in. If it's a strong seedling with a protected plug, then it'll probably outgrow some of the stuff. Okay. Okay. You guys can just keep on sending questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about lettuces as well. That's also part of the portfolio that I represent at Sakata. Lettuces are very sensitive to bolting. And Okay, thank you, Monica, for asking that question. This all depends on in which area you are based at. I think if you're in places like Natal or if you're in the Lowveld, we do have varieties that we can help you with. Something like Conquistador is a variety that they use year-round. But in areas like Brits that gets very cold, and it's also a big cabbage production area, we don't have a variety that's suited to this specific slot. A lot of people don't grow vegetables in the next 2 or 3 months because, let's say, that goes into production June, July, because that's very cold months, the plant stands still. So anything that you transplant just a little bit later will catch up to that plant in any ways. So our winter variety is Matador, but we stopped saying that probably around last week. Thank you for your question. Okay, back to the lettuces. Like I said, they are very prone to bolting. If they are planted out of slot, if the temperature fluctuations are too much, because it's a much faster maturing variety of crop, it's like 40 days, 40 to 45 to 50 days, and you can harvest. It's very sensitive to stuff like that. So you have to be sure that if you want to plant an iceberg lettuce, you have to plant a variety that's suited to that environment, and you have to know your environment very well to be able to plant lettuces. It's not something you just put into the soil. Also, lettuce should be planted from seedlings for the same reasons. Okay. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about baby cabbages. That's also one of the market trends that's growing a bit. When it comes to South African market, is adopting a lot of European standards, which means that we are starting to look at smaller products, smaller produce. So cucumbers will be smaller, tomatoes will be a little bit smaller. Okay, I'm going to talk about that market again. Thank you so much, Q. Okay. Bolting is when a variety or when a crop goes into seed. So it looks different for every crop, but it just means that the plant is under stress. When a vegetable or any crop for that matter is under stress, let's say whether it's environmental stress or whether it's in a drought condition or whether it's a lot of chemicals are sprayed, it goes into bolting, which means that it's forming seeds now. The thing that we usually harvest and that we eat is the beginning of the reproductive phase of a vegetable. So it's got two different growing phases. The one is thank you. Vegetative is the one, and that's usually when the leaves form, or in a tomato plant, for example, where the plant grows upwards and there's only leaves forming, and then the plant goes into reproductive phase, and that means it's going into flowering now. So for a cabbage, the head is the reproductive phase, the start of the reproductive phase. So if you don't harvest the head when it is mature, it will go into bolting, which means it will go into flower. And usually what happens is it becomes bitter. When it moves over from vegetative to reproductive, the product becomes a bit bitter, and it also forms a bolt talking about cabbages specifically, it forms a bolt in the center, and that's usually not something that you want to eat because it's very hard and it's not tasty at all. And like I said, Q, the cause is environmental stress or over maturity. That's it for bolting or going into seed. Okay. For the market thing. So like I said, adopting European standards, we are going into smaller products, smaller produce, and we also have a range of baby cabbages exactly for that reason. The baby cabbages covers greens and purples. You'll see that in a lot of the supermarkets there are pre-packs with a purple head and a green head. So that's exactly what they want to give to the housewives at the moment. They can process the whole head as is, and nothing is wasted. So that's the main aim of having the baby cabbages. I'm just going to answer a quick question, a common question about baby cabbages. You cannot plant a large variety at a high density and expect to harvest baby cabbages. You have to plant a baby cabbage variety to harvest baby cabbage heads. Because if you plant a large variety at a higher density, it's not going to mature. So you won't be able to harvest. Like I just explained, it has to go through the different phases, vegetative to reproductive, and you harvest the reproductive phase. So if you plant a large variety at a higher density, it's just going to be vegetative, and it's just going to be awkwardly shaped vegetative cabbages that doesn't have the place or the space to grow into a bigger cabbage. So you have to plant a baby cabbage variety because physiologically, they can only grow, vegetatively up to that stage and then go into a baby cabbage. So yes, you can, however, manipulate baby cabbage's sizing by putting the density up a bit or making the density a little bit lower. So, but you can't plant a different variety. Oh, okay. You can still ask questions and I'll just come back, but for now I'm just gonna end the video. Okay, thank you so much for participating. Bye.